Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, a new kind of podcast where no topic is off limits. We're bringing in experts and owners to have the conversations we should be having as a dog community. Each week, a new guest will share firsthand experiences, educational resources, or professional guidance to help you learn and grow along with your dog. You won't get one perspective here, you'll get them all, because every dog is different and every owner is too.
You can follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Straight Up Dog Talk, or by visiting www.straightupdogtalk.com. Tune in from any of your favorite podcast platforms.
As pet owners, something we all have to experience at some point or other in our lives with our pets is their loss. And while it's only at the end of their lives, it is a very impactful time for all of us. If you're struggling with current pet loss or anticipatory grief, I highly suggest you check out our episode guest today on Instagram or at their website, Beth Bigler, honoringouranimals.com. If you have questions, please reach out, but I highly suggest that you check them out and join one of Beth's cohorts or individual grief pet loss counseling. Beth has helped me make massive progress in my recovery from the loss of Cajun, Izzy, and Fiona, as well as prepare me for the upcoming eventual loss of Toby. As our pets age, it's very easy for us to lose sight and forget that we still have every moment until that event happens. Don't get lost. Stay in the moment.
Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. I'm Em, and I'm here flying solo tonight, but I have a very much anticipated guest with me this evening. I have Beth Bigler, pet grief counselor, and we have a lot to talk about with you tonight, and I'm so excited to have you here. How are you doing tonight?
I'm awesome, Em. I'm so excited to be here and to bring this mission and message to your audience.
Oh, well, you have a really, really difficult job, in my opinion, because I know walking clients through euthanasia in the veterinary sense is very different than what you do. You actually help people, process this because there's guilt, there's grief, it's trauma, it's traumatizing, it's a lot, and you have a really big responsibility. And I think that what you do is very admirable.
Thank you so much. It's meaningful and profound and deeply fulfilling work for me. And it is hard. There's certainly days where it's real hard. And it can be draining and it can be tiring. For me, though, I'm so hopeful when I'm working with people because they found me. And I can help them. I can help them with their anticipatory grief. I can help walk them through that euthanasia decision. I can help them on the other side in post-loss grief counseling. And so I have so much hope and so much, deep belief that they're going to get through this and we're going to get through it together. And they won't always feel this way. So that really keeps me going, even on the hard days.
Which is really incredible because when people who work in any kind of counseling, therapy, anywhere in that kind of cycle, you're not only carrying your own emotional stuff, baggage, whatever you want to call it, you're carrying it for other people too. And that is just such a huge thing because there are not enough people, I don't think, on this planet who are just nice to each other in general. My, mantra for years has been kindness matters, and, that kindness is always the first priority. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't look at it that way, and we don't kind of look at each other and think, oh, that person's probably struggling too. A lot of times we judge, the exterior and go, oh, well, that person has this, and this. They must be doing great. But that doesn't always mean that things are great. And on the other end, just because you're struggling in life stuff doesn't mean that things aren't actually great for you mentally and emotionally. So I think that for me, the thing that attracted me to your account was the fact that I didn't know that this existed. I mean, specifically having somebody to talk to about pet loss and pet grief and guilt over things that have happened over the years is something that could be really beneficial to me. So how would it not be beneficial to the audience? Because I think that we all struggle with something that has happened to us, and maybe we have those like delayed reactions. I know for me, it was my first dog had to be put down when I was about 16 years old. And I wasn't able to be there with him because I was in school. And my parents actually called me at school and told me about it. And like, they were like, we're not coming to get you. You don't need to be there and all of this stuff. But, you know, looking back, I didn't realize how much that affected me as a person and how it kind of like changed my whole path in life. And it wasn't until I got a dog as an adult that I went, oh, I made a mistake. I need to go back to school. I need to change all these things. And kind of, you know, really accept that and process it. I think I'm still processing a lot of that guilt and grief from that dog and my 16-year-old self. But I think that having a resource like you available and knowing that people can reach out to you is something that's really, really, really beneficial to this community. And every time I mention you, people are like, oh, that exists. And my response is, that's exactly what I thought. So why don't you kind of just give a little bit of your history, your background, how you decided to do what you want to do, where you're located, and maybe a little bit about your own personal pets if you have any.
Sure. Well, yeah, you know, it's an incredible thing. There are not very many people at all who do this full time as their main gig. So it is true, there's not that many of us in the world. And I certainly didn't set out when I was a little kid thinking I want to grow up and become a pet loss grief counselor. That was not my life mission. I was a very artsy kind of creative kid. I ended up being a real serious writer, creative writer in high school. And I ended up becoming a professional writer at 18, which led me to a long career in film and television in Hollywood. So I had a whole other career happening for myself that I was very fulfilled in and had a great time doing. And my soulmate cat, Arnie, when he was 11, he got a very bad prognosis on a cancer, like a 30-day prognosis. And I just felt my entire world stop because Arnie was my rock, my best friend, my soulmate, my absolute most faithful, loving companion of my life. And I didn't want to live in a world where he wasn't. And I had no idea how I could possibly walk him to his death. It just didn't seem reasonable. But I knew that I had to help him. I had to show up for him because of all the times in my life he'd shown up for me. So once I got off the floor from crying for about 3 days straight, I thought, I've got to find some help for this. I've got to be able to do this for him. So I found my incredible pet loss grief counselor who started working with me on anticipatory grief counseling. And it was transformative and life-saving because I started to learn so much more about my relationship with him and what it was bringing up for me, the idea of him not being in the world. And then I was also learning what I could do to support him. And, you know, I had done a lot of different kinds of therapy. I've been in therapy like my whole life, and I'd never done any work like this that just was so insightful and so powerful and so impactful. And so as I was, you know, working with her and really getting confidence that I could maybe step up for Arnie and help him, you know, through this tender period of life, we also were trying kind of an experimental, I mean, all chemo with cats in a way is experimental. We tried a kind of a chemo Hail Mary, and we got a remission, which was incredible.
Wow.
So I kept going to see my pet loss grief counselor because then even after the remission, I had all this fear and worry and hypervigilance. Well, what if something else happens to him? What if it doesn't hold? What if something happens to my other cat? You know, all these things. So I kind of kept going, but I loved doing the work. It was really meaningful. And I had Arnie at a regular oncology visit a few months after his remission. And I met a woman in the waiting room who was facing a very difficult euthanasia decision on a very young animal. And something kind of came over me. I was kind of divine, right? And I just went to her and I was talking to her. I took her hand and just said, what brings you in today? And she had her 3-year-old cat had ingested some lily water, and it was going to be a euthanasia for her. And this poor woman was so guilty. She felt so awful. She didn't know that lilies were toxic for cats, and she just was beside herself. And I ended up staying with her. My husband came and got Arnie and took him to his appointment. I stayed for the euthanasia and stayed and made sure she got home okay. And at the end of that night, I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to help people through these moments because I know what it was like for me when I was worried about it, with Arnie. But then I was like, well, except I'm, film and television executive and I'm great in TV shows. And maybe I'll do that when I retire. I mean, it just didn't even seem like a possibility really with the way my life was. And everything was great. Arnie did his 1-year checkup on his cancer and clean ultrasound, clean bloods. Everything was great. And just about a week and a half later, he was sitting in bed with me and he wet the bed and he didn't get up. Now, it was really unusual for him. So I took him in to the vet right away. And 4 days later, he had died because a different cancer had come in that time between that ultrasound and the blood work and had completely taken over his perfect little body. And there was no fight. There was nothing we could try. And so we had to compassionately.
I'm so sorry. That is such an awful thing to have to go through.
Fast, really fast, total blindside. However, because I had done that anticipatory work, I gave him a great death, as good as I could do, under the circumstances. And I felt really good about that. And in that moment, I was sort of like, you know what? Why am I going to wait around to do this when I'm retired? This is going to be my new calling. Arnie and I are going to do this together and we're going to go help people. And so I started my training and mentoring and all the things I had to do to do this. And then eventually started doing this full time. And that's what I've been doing for years now.
That's a really incredible story. That was kind of how I felt about my relationship with my first adult dog, Cajun, because I had always known that I wanted to be in vet med and that I wanted to be working with dogs and, whatever animals, all the animals, not really one specifically. But because of the trajectory that I went on when I was younger and that not dealing with that grief properly, I completely stepped away and I went down a different road. And it wasn't until I was 23 that I went, oh my gosh, like this is not where I'm supposed to be. This is where I'm supposed to be. This dog inspired me. And then it happened again with Fitz. And Fitz is the whole reason that I got into the dog training and started the podcast and all of those things, because totally different kind of dog and needed different things that I didn't have knowledge about. So it's really cool to hear stories about how our pets inspire us to go down these different avenues in our life and how they really change us. And I think that that's probably why it's so hard when we lose them, because they are a mental and emotional rock for us just as much as we are for them. And even though we can't maybe speak the same language, we have this understanding with them and this bond with them that is so indescribable. I mean, Toby is different than Fitz, than Vince, than Cajun, than Izzy and Fiona. It's all different. Every single one of them is different. And it's such a beautiful and magical thing. But losing that dog that, brings you to those pivotal moments in your life is really, really difficult. When I lost my dog Cajun, which has been about 10 years ago now, I couldn't even go get his ashes. Like, I was still 2 weeks later just a mess. My dad had to go get them for me because I couldn't do it. And it took me a long time to really, move past that. And if I hadn't had Toby already, I don't know when the next time I would have gotten a dog would have been, because he died in July of 2014 and I didn't get Fitz until March of 2018. So that was, a pretty big gap. And if Toby hadn't been there to kind of like hold me those 4 years, I don't know what it would have been like for me. Now, I know some people can, move a lot faster, maybe only a few months, maybe a year. But I know that that's also different for everyone too, because everyone processes things differently, or maybe they need that dog or cat to lean on and help them process that grief. Do you see some of that in your practice?
With surviving animals?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the whole topic of like readiness and when you're ready to sort of welcome another family member is a huge topic in my practice. In fact, I have a lot of people come to me only for that, right? After a loss.
Oh.
But in terms of leaning on our surviving animals, it's a very complex thing, actually. Many people that I work with, and myself included, when Arnie died, Arnie was my favorite. When I had another animal at home, I had Zelda at home, and she was not the favorite. And I was mad about that. I was mad that Arnie died instead of Zelda. I was mad that I was stuck with her because she was not my favorite. And why did Arnie have to die before her? He was younger than her, and it was very complex. And many people I work with have very difficult relationships with their surviving animals because sometimes those feelings of intimacy are just different with one animal over another. So I work with a lot of people actually on helping strengthen their relationships with their surviving animals. And that's something I worked on in my own counseling, and something that I really try to emphasize with people, both on the anticipatory side and the post-loss side, because they're there. They can show up for you. And in fact, we know that many of our surviving animals grieve. We know that our animals grieve. Sometimes we can see it, sometimes we can't see it. So we also want to be able to step up and help them as they grieve. Because not only are they grieving, they're in a house with people who are grieving and they're feeling all of that. So there's a lot of things we can do to support the surviving animals and ultimately help include them in being a support for their guardian. And most of the time, I'm trying to think of any exceptions. I mean, our surviving animals, they blossom and they change. And those relationships do often deepen and grow and become more enriching, after a death. And it's very powerful if you're willing to sort of work with it and open your heart to it, and also not judge yourself too harshly about it. Because that's a huge problem, is when we're mean to ourselves about our feelings about our surviving animals, which is why I say all the time very publicly, I was mad that Zelda lived and Arnie died. I'm very vocal about that because I want people to hear that that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. And I'm normalizing the complexity around all of our feelings around surviving animals.
Exactly. And I mean, I've seen situations too, as a pet sitter, not that long ago, probably within the last, 6 years or so, I would say, I had a client who they lost what was considered their sole dog. And when she passed, their second dog went through some very obvious grief because they were so bonded, to the point that his health started declining and rapidly.
Yes.
And so they got a puppy thinking this will be better, it'll help him, but it didn't. He never recovered from it. And I would say it was within 6 months that they lost him too. And that was devastating for me because I spent a lot of time with them. They were gone maybe once a month or once every other month. And that was kind of like my buddy duo. I loved them. And then just to lose them both so quickly, I can't even begin to imagine how the owners felt in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of compounded loss is so difficult. And it's a great reminder that our animals do grieve and we want to support them. And unfortunately, this does happen. It happens in humans too, by the way. Sometimes they call it like broken heart syndrome, and, two people die in very close proximity of each other. This does happen with animals. And so I do always recommend to people, bring your surviving animal in for a checkup after there has been a death in your family, just to get a once over, just to make sure, because sometimes things really do happen on the medical side as well as the emotional side.
Yeah, it's funny because again, that's where my dogs are so different. I really don't think, Fitz is younger. He's only 6. Toby's somewhere around 12 or 13, and he's starting to develop health conditions. And I know that he's getting to the point where he's probably going to not be around much longer. And that has been something that I have been kind of wrestling with. But I also feel like Fitz won't care, because all of the attention that is going to be on him. Fitz is the kind of dog that, comes in and pulls my hand away from Toby so that he can have both hands. And I have to say, now, the rule is 1 hand per dog. We know that the rule is 1 hand per dog, and we have to share. But Fitz is definitely a I want both hands kind of dog. So it'll be interesting to see if I'm right or wrong about how he reacts when we get to that point. Speaking about that, let's talk a little bit about the anticipatory grief, because I feel like that's a conversation. I recently tagged you in a post on Instagram. It's a conversation I have a lot with people who listen to the podcast. And it's something that obviously, I struggle with. Fitz turned 6. That was really difficult for me because that's like maybe potentially the halfway, if not less than halfway marker for his size and breed of dog. 10, 12 years is about right for that border collie, pit bull mix that he is. And then I have Toby, who's, like I said, 12 or 13 years old, and, maybe 15 or 16 is about average for that Chihuahua rat terrier mix that he is. So I think that how knowing how we can best prepare ourselves in these situations is really important information, because I know that there are a lot of people who get really upset about it and just, very emotionally cry and grieve their pets before they're even gone and forget that, hey, they're still here. We still have time. Let's take advantage of all of those moments. So why don't you speak a little bit about that and some of the practices that you recommend for that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because part of my job is to help prepare people, right? And I do that with my grief counseling, and I'm also an end of life animal companion doula, right? Death doula for animals. So, I mean, I know all the tools we have to prepare, but I do always like to say to people, it's a very tall order to ask yourself to prepare on one hand, right? Because it's so unthinkable. Because our beloveds are so entwined in our every aspect of our daily routine. We have so much proximity with them. We have so much intimacy with them. And so, we can prepare, but I also like to validate that it might feel impossible to prepare, and that's okay too, right? And of course, the goodbye with our beloveds begins the day we bring them home. And most of us don't want to think about that. And if we're lucky, we get to that lifespan moment, right? But we don't all get to that average lifespan either. And so I think an awareness, right? And even if you don't want to think about it, if a lot of people call me and they're like, I know this sounds really wild, but I never really thought my dog would die. And a lot of people say that to me. And so I think, as best we can, first just have an awareness. It's coming. We actually don't even know when it's coming. And in the case of anticipatory grief, when we talk about anticipatory grief, that usually means we've got a diagnosis or a condition or an age where we know we don't have a lot of time left, and we don't know how much time it is, which is one of the hard things about it. Because for most of us, the real anxiety-producing effect of anticipatory grief is the when. When is it going to happen? Yeah. What's it going to be like? How's it going to go? And that's such a...
Because we don't have control.
Because we have no control. That's right. So I just like to first validate that if you're having really scary feelings and anticipatory grief, like, I don't know how I'm going to go on without my beloved, and I want to fight to do everything I can, and I want to do all these medical treatments, but I also don't want her to feel like she, is poked and prodded, or I just want it to be over. I want some relief from this, right? All these kinds of feelings can come up, and whatever's coming up for you in your anticipatory grief, allow it to come. That's really powerful. And then it's like, how do we cope with uncertainty and fear and anger and powerlessness and looming dread? How do we cope with it? First thing, let's try to be as kind to ourselves as possible. Acknowledge, hey, I'm going through a really hard thing right now. And even if the other people in my community don't acknowledge it, I acknowledge that this is hard, and I'm going to be nice to myself. Because the worst thing we can do is be unkind to ourselves. That adds to our suffering. So really trying to be kind to yourself. Also, doing everything you can do to stay grounded to the present moment. Because right here, right now, your beloved is here. Right here, right now, it's a good day because your beloved is here and you get to spend it with them. So I want everybody that I work with on the anticipatory side to center their animal's end-of-life experience, center their beloved, because it's not just about you, it's about them. What kind of experience do we want our beloved to have in their end of life, in this tender, delicate time that, by the way, you get to be there for? What an opportunity to step up with your beloved and say, hey, this is hard, this is scary, we're gonna do this together, and I got your back till your very last breath. Not everybody gets that. So there's a reframing that's very powerful to be like, I get to be here for this, and I do have control over a lot of things that we do, and I am here for you. And if the more we can center their experience and give them an end-of-life experience, like we would want, or like we would want anyone we love, that is actually very powerful for us. And it helps keep us very present. We also can prepare by taking care of anything in terms of logistics that we need to. If we think we're facing a euthanasia decision, where do we want that to happen? How do we want that to happen? What do we want it to be like? Have I called the companies that maybe can come and do it in my home? Have I checked out what their schedule is like? I mean, there's a lot of logistical things you can take care of now that you don't need to take care of if you get to a crisis point or a point of having to make the decision. So it's very helpful for you to take care of as many of those logistical details and thinking those details through. And then it's very important to take care of you. This is one of those put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others kind of moments. You and everyone's situation is different, but particularly if you've been in anticipatory grief for a long time and you're caregiving and you're doing meds 5 times a day and you're helping your animal with their daily, movement and fluids and anything you're doing, you're likely very exhausted. And so you've got to prioritize taking care of yourself. And I don't just mean manis and petties and bubble baths. I mean actual meaningful self-care. And so if we can center your beloved, if we can get your logistics and medical decision-making and everything feeling great and like it's in a good place, and if we can help take care of you and your big feelings, that's kind of the magical braid I think of when I work with anticipatory clients. If we can get those three things all working together, you are going to give your beloved a good death, because that's what we want for them. We want them to have a good death.
And I think that sometimes is the scariest part about it, because just listening to you talk about that, I'm sitting here thinking about, my first dog that died was actually my second dog that I got. And my second dog that died was actually my third dog that I got. And then Cajun passed, but they were all relatively very young. Izzy was 6, Fiona, I think, was 6 or 7, and Cajun was like just turned 10. And that's very young. So I think that's another thing too that people don't think about, is that every dog's lifespan is going to be very different. And so I've actually never had a dog that has gotten into their geriatric years until Toby. And so, this is going to be a lot of different decision making. And now knowing that he has a heart murmur, okay, like getting him on meds potentially and going down that road is going to be an all new experience for me, because I haven't dealt with that in my own personal life. I've helped other people through it in the medical sense or through pet sitting experience, but not with my own dog. And so I feel like that grief it builds differently with each dog, because our experiences with each dog is different and our relationship with each dog is different. So I don't think that there's any right or wrong way to prepare yourself, but I do really like the suggestion that you made about, figuring out how you would like them to pass from this world is probably a good way to start. And I definitely have been looking into, in-home euthanasia here in our area, because I don't think that any of my dogs had a positive experience when we've gone to the vet the last 3 times, for me personally. And now knowing that in-home euthanasia is something that is more accessible and more widely acceptable, I think that's definitely something that a lot of people kind of look to have more information about. And I think that learning about it and preparing for that is something that's really awesome, just in terms of the fact that, one, you're helping your pet exit with dignity, which, like you said, humans also want to do that as well. And death with dignity is really important to me. So I feel like, giving our pets that last little bit of empowerment, that last little bit of peace, they're in their safe place, they're in their home, they're with their person. And that can really be a beautiful thing versus like, it could also be a terrible thing.
Well, yes, we are really lucky that in-home euthanasia has come so far. It's in more places now than ever. It can be a very powerful option. I had wonderful in-home euthanasia last year for my cat Zelda, who was 19, and it was a terrific experience. But I also would like to validate that if that does not feel right for you, if you would rather go to your veterinarian's office, if it doesn't feel safe for you to do it in your home for whatever reason, that's okay too. Because I think there's a big narrative about how in-home is sometimes better, right? Like that narrative is coming a lot now. And there's some people where it just isn't the right fit. And I want to validate that. And also, there's a lot of circumstances where you just can't do it. And in my situation with Arnie, it was not medically safe to transport him home. And I desperately wanted to get him home. And I desperately wanted him to say goodbye to Zelda. And I desperately wanted the veterinarian who gave him to me to come and do it in our home. And it was not safe. And so I had to do it at an intensive care vet, also an ER vet. And I made it as beautiful an experience as I could. And you can make a beautiful experience for your beloved, even if it has to happen in an ER or in a veterinary office. So just anyone who's listening who's just worried about if the in-home isn't going to be in the cards for you, it can still be a great experience, even if that isn't the choice that you get to make or that you're able to make.
Especially if you have a really good relationship with your vet, which I do have a really good relationship with my vet. And, previously with Fiona and Izzy, it was the veterinarian that I worked for that I took one of them to, Izzy. And so that was a lot easier. But that was also a really difficult situation because she had just tried to kill Fiona. And so I had to put her down. And I actually still feel guilty about that because I was so angry with her. And, she was technically my ex-husband's dog that I said, I can't do this. And I had to leave. I couldn't be there for her when she passed. And, it had been 4 years of managing that behavior. And I still feel bad that I wasn't there for her at the end. But I also had another dog that was in emergency surgery. And it was kind of, you can only pick one. And that can be a really difficult situation to be in. And I think that's another thing where, validating your emotions, you have to make tough decisions sometimes. And sometimes they're not going to be the right decision. And sometimes they're not going to be enough options, unfortunately. And you just have to understand that it's how life works sometimes. And you have to get to the point where you can forgive yourself, because pulling on to all that anger and all of that grief is not going to help you with the next dog and the next dog and the next dog. And it doesn't get easier. That's for sure. It doesn't, right? The next dog isn't going to be easier. And the next loss isn't going to be easier. And preparing for that next loss is never going to be easier, because that's the cycle of life. You posted something, maybe it was yesterday or today, about our dogs. And so your post was about comparing human loss to pet loss and how people often diminish and say that, it's just a dog, and it versus this is a person. Well, some of us bond very differently with our animals than we do with other people. That's not saying that I don't have friends or family that I wouldn't be upset. Obviously, I wouldn't grieve if I lost them, but pet loss is a very real thing. Our relationship with our pets is a very real thing. And I think that people who try to diminish our feelings about our pets, or even just deny that it's an actual true connection, either one are just not animal people in general, or they have never had that kind of connection with animals before.
Yes. And any kind of grief stirs up stuff for people that they don't even know is being stirred up, so they can say and do all kinds of boneheaded things about it. But yeah, our animals, for so many of us, it's the most intimate relationship of our life. Their physicality, their proximity, their understanding, their loyalty. I mean, a lot of people, even if you have a partner in the house or kids in the house, you touch your dog, you talk to your dog more than you talk to your partner or kids some days, right? And we have a lot of research on the human-animal bond. We know why this relationship is so profound. And it makes total sense. Your brain is also deeply impacted by grief. I'm a real brain nerd, and I love knowing what we know about your brain on grief. And, the interruption in your daily routine and all those little moments of your life that are impacted by your beloved being there is very, very hard on your brain. It's one of the first things I do when I start working with people, is giving them tools to help support their brain, because our neurons are so disrupted when this happens. And this physical presence, this emotional, total acceptance. I mean, when was the last time your dog lied to you? When was the last time your dog made you feel bad about yourself? When was the last time your dog had an unrealistically high expectation of you? And for a lot of us who maybe grew up in households where we never had that before, it's a huge, important, and for many of us, the most profound relationship of our lives.
Well, and I think that with animals, it truly is probably what the human brain thinks of as unconditional love. Because like you said, they don't judge us. They don't have expectations. They don't look at us like other humans look at us, because they're dogs, cats. They don't think the same way that we do. They don't have the same guidelines and expectations and societal norms that we set up for each other and then look at each other and judge each other with, because they're animals and they don't think like that. They think about their next meal. They think about their next belly rub. They think about the next time they can go out in the yard and play with their ball or their walk, or maybe even, the next squirrel that they get to bark out the window. Then dogs and cats have so much more, just joy, because they don't have to process the things in life that humans do. And I think that having that connection to that pure love and that pure joy I think that's maybe why it makes the grief so much more difficult, because you lose like your little window to that, that just all-encompassing beauty and goodness.
Or you feel like you lost it. Now, I would argue
Yes.
it's not lost at all.
Yes, it's still there. I think that that's where people get lost, because you're right. It is still there. You don't have to have the physical dog for that feelings and those emotions to still be there. I think that because we're human, we think about reciprocity and like having that feedback and the dog to look at us and the dog to lay in our lap, or the cat to, curl around our head and sleep at night, because those are the things that we attach that joy and that love to. And when that physical presence isn't there anymore, that can be an adjustment as to how our emotional, bond with them feels. But no, you're absolutely right. And I've seen you say that on posts on your Instagram before, is that the love doesn't change. The fact that they're here or not changes. And that doesn't mean that how you feel about them has to change. And I think that was like the first thing that made me go, oh, wow, holy cow, I never thought about it that way.
Well, yeah, and I take that a step further. I mean this when I say it. I feel more evolved and expanded and in deeper connection with Arnie than I did on the day he died over 5 years ago, because our relationship is still continuing. He is not earthside. He is not physically present, but our relationship is still going. And that's something that I really work to have all of my clients find their way to a continued connection. It's such an amazing thing to keep your beloved included in your day-to-day life, to keep in conversation with them, to keep in collaboration with them. And yes, those gifts and guidance and lessons and teachings, none of those are gone. We have those with us forever. And I believe, and what I try to help people experience when we're working together, is that we can keep giving to that relationship and we can keep receiving from it forever.
Well, and I mean, I believe, and people are probably going to think that I'm crazy for saying this, but I'm going to say it because I truly believe that our animals come back to us. I know a lot of people can relate to that movie, A Dog's Purpose, where the dog continues to come back at points throughout her life. And I honestly believe that that's what happened with Cajun and Fitz. And I believe that Vince was my 16-year-old dog, my golden retriever, my very first dog ever. It was the same way. I believe that part of Vince moved into Cajun, and then that part of Cajun and Vince moved into Fitz. And I think that whether it's that soul or that spark or just like some kind of shard of something, energy, whatever you want to call it, that, everything always comes full circle. And so if that piece of you is taken from you at some point in your life, it's going to have to come back, because then you yourself as a person are not completely whole without it. So I think that the universe always gives us opportunities to open ourselves up to bigger and better experiences. And Vince was what I needed when I was, 6 to 16. And Cajun was what I needed when I was 23 to 33. And Fitz is what I needed from, 37 until however long I have him. And Toby kind of fit in there, and Izzy and Fiona fit in there. And maybe they were all parts of each other too. Who knows? But I truly think that if we look for the beauty and we look for that like spark, that, really examine your pets, really examine your relationship with your pets, and now look back and go, maybe you'll go, oh yeah, actually I feel that too. Because I think that dogs and cats help fulfill a human need that humans can't give to each other. And I think that's why we are so closely bonded with animals, and why we have been for hundreds and thousands of years, because there's something so special about their makeup that they just complete us as people, which I think is really, really cool.
It's awesome. That's the best thing ever, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It really is. It really is. Let's go back to the conversation we were having about how I had to leave Izzy and choose between her and Fiona, because that was something that, I got a lot of grief from my ex-husband, and a lot of people, didn't understand, how could you not be there for her? But I can also say that as a vet tech, it happens quite frequently. There are a lot of people who can't be there for their pet in those last moments because they are too overwhelmed with grief, or they are just not mentally prepared for it because it was quick, or, their dog got out and it got hit by a car and somebody brought it in and we had to euthanize it because we couldn't do anything to help it. And they missed that being there for their pet for that instance. So I think that people should do what they're comfortable with. If you can't be in there, then do whatever you can to make it comfortable for them. Whether that's, have someone come to your home or go into the vet and leave it with the care of the vet techs and the veterinarian. But don't feel like you have to explain yourself, because we get it. Behind the doors, we get it. We understand. I can't say how many times the first doctor I worked for did not allow it. We were not allowed to get emotional. We were not allowed to cry with our patients. We were not allowed to cry, in the treatment rooms with them. And if we started to get emotional at all, she would kick us out. Wow. And going in, not having any idea that, this was going to be something that I dealt with on a regular day, that was really difficult at first. And then you get better and better at turning off your feelings and being there for the clients and their pets, and really being able to make it about them and focus on them. But it is emotional. It's really difficult to deal with afterwards, because you do still have to turn those feelings on and process them later. So not being able to be there because you physically don't think or emotionally don't think that you can handle it or process it, that might be nicer for your pet than staying there and just being absolutely hysterical because of it.
Yeah, it's something, again, there's like kind of a dominant narrative and lots of artwork about this and lots of things on social media about, being with your animal until their last breath. And I think that's great if you're able to do it, and I do help prepare people. I walk them through what the euthanasia will be like and how they want to position themselves and what they want to say. I mean, for some people, like, they need a lot of time to kind of prepare for it and think about it and kind of imagine it. And there are many people who just can't. And I think we have to normalize and validate and be supportive of people if they can't, because it's too hard emotionally, if it's making them sick to their stomach, if their presence is going to bring more chaos and catastrophe into the room and scare their beloved, it may not be a calming force, Also, there are many people, like you said, who can't be there for a whole host of reasons. Travel, they get delayed, they're not able to be present for whatever reason. And that is so devastating. And whenever we are unkind to people about a very challenging moment in their lives like this, we are adding to their suffering. They are already suffering about this. And so I do hope that we can kind of reduce stigma around this. And you know what? Sometimes people make that decision and they think, I would do it differently next time, and they do. And that's how we learn in life from things. And we have to be allowed to learn. We have to be allowed to do things differently the next time. We're humans. It's how we grow. So I appreciate that you shared that with us, because it's a thing that carries some stigma. And I think the more we validate it, the further we can get in this conversation as a culture.
Well, and that's, I think, my biggest thing with this podcast is just trying to put it out there and trying to be open and honest about a lot of these things, because I've experienced them. I've seen my friends experience them. I've seen clients, patients, other people experience them. And it really is not like black and white. There's so much gray in the middle that people don't realize how difficult these situations are for people. And, how potentially just one little ripple, like you said, you can have that favorite pet, or you can have the pet that you have like a grudge against, which I did, which was, Izzy, because she was legitimately attacking my other dog. And no matter how hard I worked with her, that diagnosis, that idiopathic aggression, was not going to get better. It was not going to go away. And I made the decision to, put off her euthanasia because I wanted to see if I could handle it. And I brought in heavy duty trainers and I worked with her and we kept them separate. And then because of one minor slip up, my other dog almost lost her life. And, that ended up traumatizing her, and which ended up, her killing one of my parents' dogs, which is a whole slew of other events. And that just, that guilt just shifts around and it carries. And I think that for people to think that every single experience with our dogs and our cats is going to be positive is absolutely asinine, unfortunately, because we are going to have negative experiences. We're going to have bad days. We're going to have dogs that are not made for this world. And unfortunately, their time here is going to be shorter. And it's just so sad that as humans, like, our number one priority always seems to be to judge. And we shouldn't be doing that. We should be accepting. We should be listening. We should be helping. We should be being kind and understanding that everybody's always going through something, whether it's dealing with pets or just personal stuff. We're going through it. Life is hard. And when we add in things like judgment, all we do is put pressure on ourselves and pressure on other people, and we make those experiences that much harder for us. So if we're already feeling guilty because we had to decide that this was when our dog was going to go, or something traumatic happens and now our dog has to go, or we weren't prepared for it and we've lost them now, that makes it that much harder, because now you really don't want to talk about the fact that you're grieving the loss of this animal, because now you have all of the guilt and the expectations of society piling up on top of you, completely smothering any need or desire to say, hey, I'm hurting. This really sucks. And then somebody goes, well, it's your fault. You should have put that dog down 4 years ago. Fortunately, at that point in time, I had a lot of support on the other end of that spectrum. My trainer, Ron, who has since passed, unfortunately, was very supportive. And he said, Emily, you did more than any person I have met in my entire, career, 30 plus years, 40 plus years of training dogs would have ever done. He said, you went above and beyond. So, wherever that can settle, wherever that can help you with your guilt. But at the other end of that, I had my ex-husband who was furious with me because he was out of town and he wasn't able to be there for him. And I had to make that decision. But when your dog attacks your other dog and tries to rip her throat out and you've just had brain surgery, tell me where the danger is, because I felt like my safety and my stepdaughter's safety and my other dog's safety was a higher priority than hers at that point in time. And I was angry. And it's okay. I think it's okay to be angry. It took me a long time to get over that and be okay with being angry, because I felt guilty too. But we do need to be accepting and understanding, and we do need to kind of destigmatize a lot of these social norms that we put out there, because emotions are vast and endless, and they are ever changing, and situations are too. So again, that kind of goes back to the don't judge a book by its cover, because you don't know. You don't know what people are going through, and you really just do need to give grace.
And don't judge our own books.
Yeah. No,
as an
say that problem. Being nice to yourself. That's so important. So important.
Yeah, that's a huge piece in my work with clients is really bringing in a lot of self-compassion and dialing down our critical voices inside of us, because we are hard on ourselves. And we're especially hard on ourselves when we feel like our beloveds are their lives are in our hands. We are entirely responsible for every aspect of their lives. And so we can really beat ourselves up about our choices we made while they were outside, choices about their end of life, choices in our grief, right? And that can be a really devastating thing, adding to the sorrow that you're already experiencing. So it's the one thing that if I could just wave a wand and give every animal griever self-compassion and self-kindness, everybody would hopefully be feeling a lot lighter than they do today.
If I had a magic wand, I'd just let everybody's dogs live as long as they wanted them to live.
Great.
It's so much of it.
For real.
When I heard about that vaccine coming out that says, it's supposedly going to be able to extend dogs' lives, I was like, okay, how much is this going to cost? I mean, this is going to be absolutely insane for the veterinary world if this is an actual legitimate thing, because people are just going to be handing over money, hand over foot, because we all want the same thing. We don't ever want our dogs or cats to die. But speaking of, I love that word, that beloved. I need to change that, because I really love that you've used that term, because I think it gives it like a little bit more depth, and it gives it like a more well-rounded, like this is connected to me feeling. versus even just saying their names, because then it doesn't even have to be specific, because you can make it about the spirit of and encompass all of your pets, which is really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I've done a lot to try to change the lexicon around pet loss grief. I'm doing a lot of work to try to change our language because I don't like the language that we use. So I've worked really hard at that. Another word I really like is guardian. So you're coming out of vet med, you're all trained to say owners, right? Owners and clients and patients, right?
That's the other one I'm trying to change.
Yeah, owner for me is I'm not calling you out, Em. I'm just like, because owner is so common because of vet med, right? Like, and that's the kind of currency in vet med. But owner is so funky for me because, animals are still property. That's why we don't treat them with the same rights. I mean, just the whole thing. So I try to say guardian, and I like that a little better than owner too. So I'm just throwing that out there too. No pressure.
No, that's one I've absolutely been changing, because in the dog training world, that's the word that defines you as, one end of the spectrum versus the other. You use tools, you don't use tools, you're balanced, you're free, sports free. There's not really like a middle ground. And I think that my favorite term that has come out recently, which was Mirror Image Canine, said it, and they called it relationship-based training. And I was like, yes, I am on board with that. Give me that title. Like,
I love that we can evolve language in all areas, training, grief. There's always room for improvement in the way we talk about things, and the way we talk about things matters. If we're going to make any cultural shifts in this, which is my mission, is to try to really start changing the cultural conversation around this grief.
Same, mine too. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I know that we have discussed you coming back. So we're definitely going to have to do that, because there are so many topics in this category specifically, even, just day to day, and how to deal with our mental health and our pets, that you can probably help people with as well. So is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with tonight?
Well, I would like to invite everyone. If you don't already follow me on Instagram, my Instagram is at Honoring Our Animals. Come on, check out the Insta. It's a really lovely community of people. I'd like to invite anyone who would like to participate. I do a monthly memorial service. Every single month, I put out a call for names, and I do a service where we honor beloveds who have transitioned, and also any beloveds who are struggling, or anybody who's in anticipatory grief. We honor them as well in that service. So sign up for notifications, and then you'll know when I put out the call for names each month. And attending that service for so many people is very powerful. I read your names alongside your beloveds, and it's a really beautiful time to be with other people who get it, who care about all of our animals who have transitioned. And it's a beautiful event. So come on over on that to the Insta. I also have a newsletter that I put out every single week, and I talk about both anticipatory and post-loss grief in the newsletter. Just a little kind of shot in the arm each week with some hopefully tools and inspiration, ideas for all kinds of topics related to this. So you can check that out on my website, which is honoringouranimals.com. And I'd love to get you in on the newsletter. I also have a section in the newsletter where you can tell the story about your beloved. So you can always submit for that, which is really fun to read about other people's animals. And then if you are interested in getting more customized support, I do work one-on-one with people. I also work in small cohort group settings with people for both anticipatory grief and post-loss grief. So if that's something that appeals to you, or you just want to learn more, come on over to my website at honoringouranimals.com and set up a consultation, and I or someone on my team will reach out to you and figure out if we're a good fit, and we can begin together. One thing too, because we talked about this on our call, it's never too late. Even if your loss was 6 months ago or a year ago or 10 years ago, I told them I worked with someone, the loss was over 20 years ago. And if you feel like you'd like some extra support to move through your guilt or your anger, or you're thinking about the last day, or any of those big things, you come on over, and I'll take good care of you.
You absolutely will. You have made huge changes for me just in having the support of your account and our conversations. And I can't wait for us to dive in more on the podcast and personally with my own work that I need to get through. And I just look forward to continuing on building this amazing relationship with you. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Beth.
Thank you.
We cannot wait to have you come back.
I'm looking forward to it.
For listening to this episode of Straight Up Dog Talk, and we will see you guys next week.
Straight Up Dog Talk was created by Emily Breslin. It is edited, produced, and co-hosted by Josh Wasta under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk, LLC, and Emily Breslin. If you're enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe to be sure you don't miss an episode, and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister show, Unpacked, with Jerry Sheriff and Madison Simpson. Thanks for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next week.